President Trump was lukewarm on Bannon's future on Tuesday. Watch this.
I like Mr. Bannon. He's a friend of mine. But Mr. Bannon came on very late. You know that. I went through 17 senators, governors, and I won all the primaries. Mr. Bannon came on very much later than that. And I like him. He's a good man. He is not a racist, I can tell you that. He's a good person. He actually gets a very unfair press in that regard. But we'll see what happens with Mr. Bannon.
And that appeared to be, at least to observers, the kiss of death, a signal that Bannon was on his way out. This is, we're hearing, at least 19 conservative groups are protesting the removal of Steve Bannon and the potential removal of Kellyanne Conway. That's being discussed, too. My panel joins me now, National Review editor and Fox News contributor Rich Lowry, former George W. Bush policy advisor Michael Barnes, and former Obama campaign regional field director Robin Biro. Welcome all. Rich, I'm starting with you. This had to be one of the most telegraphed resignations/firings. We've been talking about it in-house for days and could not confirm it. The question was really just timing. What does this mean going forward? Is this the clean sweep?
Well, it's going to be very interesting because Donald Trump is a committed populist/nationalist, and now he's surrounded at his top team with very few people who agree with that worldview. You know, you have a lot of New York Democrats now, the family and various investment bankers, former investment bankers, and you have very impressive, patriotic, but not really highly ideological generals. So it's going to be an interesting match, and I think the report we just heard is accurate. You will see Bannon go after all these people around Trump that he thinks aren't truly part of the agenda and aren't serving him well, and that could get really ugly.
Well, let's turn to agenda. Michael, to you, what happens to tax reform? What happens to fixing Obamacare? What happens to just getting a budget done next month, or maybe raising the debt ceiling?
Until the president imposes some discipline on himself, we're going to see that none of those priorities are going to be achieved, because we've seen this week with the president's remarks on Charlottesville forever that so far that the chief of staff, John Kelly, a four-star Marine general, has not been able to impose discipline on the president. Perhaps the White House today with Steve Bannon's departure. But until there is discipline from the president, there's going to be no deal making with members of Congress, and there's going to be no desirable outcomes on these policy issues. And so the president has to recognize he's got to get into the mainstream on American values, like his response to the Charlottesville massacre in terms of this attack on mainstream American values.
Well, you know, the question is this turning a page with what we've, Carl Icahn gone. We've got, look, I think we've even got a full screen on this. 6 folks have departed. This administration is only 7 months old, and already you're seeing this is the old guard, okay? They are gone. They are done. Carl Icahn has resigned as well, who's sort of an informal advisor. But you're seeing a big change in the leadership here, Robin. Could this signal that things are about to get different? You have other people in charge now. Treasury Secretary Mnuchin, people who may be more dedicated to getting things done. Is it a good signal or a bad one?
That's a good question, Jerry. I would argue that the CEOs know what's up, but they have their finger on the pulse. They could not have their businesses, the brand of their businesses, be damaged by the chaos of this White House right now, especially what happened this past weekend and the president's floundering response. It just kept going back and forth. So, I know that they were basically protecting their companies. I don't argue. I don't disagree. I know that Carl Icahn basically let the president know. He got the president's blessing to leave today, in effect, and said that it meant no harm to the president. But I do think that they're concerned, like I said, for the sake of their own business. Now, going forward, we've got General Kelly. He's going to be, I'm still hopeful that once Trump comes back from vacation, that Kelly can rein him in maybe on some of these tweets, because the president is still just on
We've got something that's just in right now that I want you guys to hear. Fresh tweet. Bannon will apparently return as executive chairman of Breitbart. He's going to host those evening editorial meetings, Rich. What does this tell you? Is he going to be more effective outside the administration than in? Well,
that's what Trump has to hope. And Trump actually has a history. There are various people he fired during the campaign they still has a warm relationship with. So I'd expect it would serve Trump's interest to try to keep Bannon within the circle, even though he's no longer in the White House. And I just agree with my 2 colleagues on this panel. this week has not helped the agenda. It hasn't destroyed it, but it's made it marginally more difficult when it wasn't going great guns anyway. So, you know, I think...
Big question about what happens next. That's
right. So I think, Kelly, he can run the staff better, but the question is, can the president run himself better?
Well, I want to ask a question, though, Michael, to you about these conservative groups, some 19 writing a letter protesting what's going on with Bannon leaving. Here's what they said in their letter. While others may come and go in the White House, we feel sure that with Steve and Kellyanne at your side, you will always hear the voices of those of us who have supported you through thick and thin, despite the efforts by some to manage you and your message. This letter penned by some Tea Party people, a lot of conservative activists. Is the base at risk here? Do you worry that those folks might run away? Is that a concern for Trump?
No, I think that what happens in the White House with staffing is going to have no impact on the base, but it has an absolutely important impact on the moderates and the independents who are actually the ones who got Trump elected in the first place. And what we see now with a 35% approval rating is that Trump has lost those individuals. And so he has got to get in line with moderate and mainstream American values on issues like Charlottesville, and then be able to make deals with members of Congress, and then be able to advance the priorities that are not the priorities of this conservative base, but actually the priorities of the mainstream, independent, and moderate voters who elected the president, dealing with health care,
let me interrupt you here for
reform.
just a second, if I can, and we don't have much time, so we're going to hit this and then move on. But, Michael, you got to have a Congress that can operate, that can get something done, and we just don't seem to have that.
Well, what we see now is that the Congress is not going to be pushing for the president's agenda anymore. They are not going to stick their necks out for the president. They're going to proceed with their own agenda, and that will require that they negotiate with Democrats. But they will get something done on these issues despite the president.